Hey guys, and welcome back to another Lost Bits video right here on TetraBitGaming, the series where we explore the unused, altered, and unseen content in gaming. We are back again today, diving into the cut content of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. If you haven't watched my first video going over the various bits of pre-release stuff, of course, definitely recommend checking it out, but in this video we'll be diving more into the unused stuff left over on disc. And with all of that said, hammer that like button below, it's time to check out some more Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door Lost Bits. Alright, so to kick things off for this video, let's go over a few of the currently documented unused animations left over for characters seen in the game. For starters, we have this unused animation of a rather concerned looking Dupless doing some heavy breathing, and this animation was apparently meant for him getting poisoned during a battle. And since it's normally impossible for the player to poison Dupless during a battle without the use of cheats, yeah, this never ended up getting used. Then next, we have a pair of unused animations for Flavio looking through his telescope, one of him just standing there, and one for him talking. And then we got several unused animations for Lord Crump here, both in a regular style as well as with one horn drooping. These animations include him rubbing his hands together, doing the X-Naught salute, fixing one of his horns that flops over, and finally, one of him doing what I like to call the Crump Chuckle. After this, we actually have a few unused animations for Grifty, one of the Rogueport denizens that you can find on the roof up here, where you can pay him to share some bits of lore. Anyways, for Grifty, left over in the game are animations of him running, as well as sprinting. Now normally, Grifty isn't ever seen moving at all, as we can only ever see him stationary up here, so the existence of these other animations definitely seems to suggest that there may have originally been more planned for this character than just chilling on this roof. Then lastly here, for the unused animations of the characters normally seen in the game, is one of Princess Peach herself, and this is for an animation cycle of her running while holding up the front of her dress. Although Peach can be seen running in the game, it's never like this. Now we'll get to some more unused sprites and objects in a bit, but for now, let's shift gears and go over a pair of unused audio tracks left over in the game. First up, we have an unused track that's believed to have been intended to be used for the inside of Riverside Station, where oddly enough in the final game it doesn't have any background music. Let's give it a quick listen. And then after this is an old track meant for the title screen of the game, and this is actually the title screen track that was used in the pre-release demo builds of the game, which I covered in my previous video. This track goes pretty hard, so I think it's a shame that it wasn't at least repurposed somewhere else in the game. Next up, it appears that there are a few unused battle stages left over in the game, all featuring brick designs on the sides, some lights, as well as each of them having their own color of curtains: red, green, blue, as well as white. Now it's been speculated that these may have been scrapped rank levels of the stages that the player can unlock, but honestly, just based on how less intricate the designs are for these stages compared to the ones seen in the game, especially the Superstar rank stage, I think it almost looks like these may have just been early versions of this stage instead. Moving on, there are quite a few unused items that are found left over in the game, some of which also have graphics and descriptions associated with them too. Now some of these are seen in the game, but not exactly as items that you can keep and check their description, if that makes any sense. These items include a Mario poster, which although this graphic meant for it is seen in Chapter 2, it's never an item that you can obtain normally. There's the magical map, which although you obviously do get to use in this game, it's never actually stored as a key item or anything. There's data for the poisoned cake, which isn't ever used since when you do get it in the glitz pit, you instantly eat it and don't ever get to store it. And similarly, there's data for the regular cake, which for the exact same reason, you can't normally see its associated description. What's extra interesting about the regular cake though is that it can actually still be re-implemented into the game and can be used either during or outside of a battle, and it will restore 10 HP. Also similar, there's a description for the Ultra Stone that isn't seen as it gets taken away by Merlin before you have a chance to check it. Then there's a description for a Star Stone, and as I covered in my previous video, this was an early name for the crystal stars, as they're referred to as Star Stones in the Japanese version. And interestingly, it seems to use the sprite for the star key as a placeholder here, so this must have been made up before the final crystal star graphics were finished. After this, we have graphics for both a blue and red paper item, both which default to invalid item text, but minus the colors. They appear the same as the Gold Bob guide item, so these might have been planned to be used in a similar context. Then we have a Koopa Curse item that still has functionality, and when re-implemented into the game, it will give a chosen enemy the slow status ailment for 3 turns. But oddly enough, despite having this green dry bones graphic associated with it, it ends up defaulting to the graphic for Zap Tap instead in battle. And then next, we have a few items that only have their graphics left over, and these include a pillow, what looks like a coconut mixing bowl, as well as a really cool looking fire flower rod. Then we have another unused item that has leftover functionality that would have been called Trade-Off, and this would have boosted the amount of star points that Mario would get after winning a battle by boosting the rank of all enemies in that battle. The enemies ranking up doesn't make them any more challenging or anything, but you just get more star points, which is nice. And interestingly, I don't believe this rank up graphic is ever normally seen, so their appearance here, still being functional with this item, makes it likely that this item was cut from the game closer to release. And then, in addition to all of those unused items, there are also several badges that were cut from the game but are still left over unused. First are several badges hailing from the first Paper Mario game, including Mega Quake, Mega Jump, Mega Smash, as well as the Triple Dip badge, and these were all likely cut due to these being made redundant with the ability to stack badges in the 1000-Year Door. Then other unused badges include several that don't have any leftover functionality, such as this one that just has this sprite associated with it. There's a partner variant of the Happy Flower badge that was never implemented, and then there's also a pair of badges for Mario and a partner variant respectively that appear to use a graphic similar to that of the Damage Dodge badge, so their effects might have been similar as well. And then for unused badges that do have functionality left over, we got unused partner versions of the Lucky Start, Lucky Day, Pity Flower, All or Nothing, as well as FP Drain badges, which, as you can see, all had graphics and descriptions made up for them. And they still work in the game to boot, making it pretty interesting that the decision was made to cut them. And then there's also this pair of badges, which although they still default to an invalid item name and description, with their similarity to the charge item, it's not surprising that these would have been for a super charge move. And yeah, we don't even need to speculate with this one, as these also have leftover functionality, and they allow either Mario or a partner to do an equally scrapped super charge move. Unfortunately, however, this supercharge move appears to function identical to the regular charge here, so I suppose although this item and functionality is left over, it never ended up getting fully developed. And then last up for the badges, we got a really interesting Debug badge, and although it defaults to the Zap Tap icon again, it still has some really cool functionality. Well, for starters, just like the unused partner Lucky badge we just saw earlier, it also has a pretty interesting description left over in Japanese that apparently translates to, "It's strange that you can see this message." Like they knew that whoever was seeing this description in the game probably altered the game a bit to do so. I think it's pretty funny. Anyways, with the Debug badge equipped, big surprise, some debugging features get activated, and these include having the run meter fill up automatically without having to mash the A button, which is super helpful if you just want to run away from battles without tiring your thumb. And then, the better set of benefits this badge offers is that not only will both Mario and a partner automatically always nail a super guard against all incoming enemy attacks, but both characters will also always automatically perfectly execute any action command for any move, and if that wasn't enough, all stylish moves are also automatically performed as well. So yeah, this badge makes Mario and his party an absolute unit to be reckoned with, making any battle infinitely easier to get through. But you also have to be careful, as since each action command is automatically completed, if you use the Power Bounce badge, which for normal enemies allows you to bounce as long as you press A at the right time, the number of bounces the game allows you to do is 9,999. So, as seen in this experiment by JDaster64, yeah, you'll be sitting there for a while. And while we're on the topic of debug features, there's also a small debug mode that can be enabled quite easily on the title screen. The catch is, though, that it's certainly not the most interesting feature in the world, at least compared to what we usually cover on this series. So if you press X, B, R, B, Y, and L on the title screen, you'll enter into the debug mode. And basically, all this lets you do is view the build date of the game on the title screen whenever you hold down the Z button. And also, if you somehow manage to cause the game to crash, if this debug mode is enabled, a crash screen will pop up, and yeah, that's really about it. Next up, there's actually an unused status ailment left over in the game, which thankfully is still functional and can be re-implemented. When inflicted on an enemy, it will cause this also unused status graphic to pop up, which appears like a worried face. And basically, this effect was going to be the inverse of the attack up status, as although it's currently unclear by what amount, it would seemingly have decreased a character's attack power for 3 turns. Now, although we saw a bunch of normally unused text associated with the items and badges earlier, there's actually an absolute truckload of additional unused text strings in the game, including several Goombella tattles, text left over from the E3 demo of the game, placeholder messages, and more. Now, much like in my previous video on the pre-release stuff, in the interest of time, there's obviously way too many of these to go over in this video, so as always, if you want to read up on all of them, I highly encourage you to head over to the cutting room floor page for this game, which will be linked with my sources in the description below. But some highlights here include references to some unused star power attacks, such as Heart Shoot, Lucky Ball, Kaganui, which apparently refers to the ninja technique of shadow sewing, where a ninja would apparently hypnotize a target into a shadow and then pin that shadow down with kunai, as well as a reference to a huge Mario, suggesting some sort of move where Mario would grow to a large size to do more damage or something. Then we have leftover descriptions for several partner moves that went on to be cut from the game, including a move where Miss Mouse would check behind the stage for hidden items, Koops would have some sort of flaming shell attack, and then Flurry would have had an attack which would drop lightning on all enemies, but this attack also had the negative effect of there being a chance of electrifying Mario too. And then lastly for the unused text, at least for this video, is text for a normally unseen test email, and this is found in a bunch of different languages. The English message reads, Designer, Paper Mario and Paper Mario 2 3D level designer, gets restless when not gaming, can't tell the difference between Brett and Bert. Now most of these messages kind of all translate to the same thing, with a bit about not being able to tell the difference between 2 words being slightly altered, like with at the river versus riverside in the German version, or Kawade versus Kawabe in the Japanese version, referring to Ryota Kawade and Chie Kawabe, who were the chief and art directors for this game respectively. And then the French localization of this test email seems to be the most different, with it explicitly actually mentioning that it's an email text test, as well as a Michael who apparently wrote this text up thanking Hélène for her amazing work. Both Michael and Hélène here appear to have been part of the French localization team for this game, so it all seems to check out. Next, let's get back to some more unused graphics. First up, we have an early version of Bonetail's head sprite, where I guess channeling his inner Sans Undertale was once planned to have a blue eye visible in his skull, and for whatever reason, maybe to make him look scarier or something, this blue eye was removed. Next, we have this early graphic for the hotel in Poshley Heights for the Japanese version of the game, as Pick here is referring to the Japanese name for the area, Picari Hills. However, in the final version across all regions, only a simple hotel graphic is used. Then we got a pair of normally unseen background graphics for the paper and tube games in Pianta Parlor, as well as one for Twilight Trail meant for the room just before Creepy Steeple, where we can see some trees that aren't present in the graphic that is used. And yeah, all of these are technically used, but just covered up, so if we zip the camera around in all of these areas, we can see these other background graphics in action. Next, we have this teaser screen from an earlier point in development, still rocking the old Paper Mario 2 logo. Then, seemingly leftovers from the first Paper Mario game, we have sprites for Mario's running away animation using the graphic style from the first game. There's a leftover sprite of Tubba Blubba's heart. There's also a sprite of some Japanese text that translates to no hit, which was used in the first game. And then, found amongst the textures for Bowser, there's also a sprite of the Star Rod from the first Paper Mario, though it appears its design got an update for this game, suggesting that it might have once been planned to have played at least some sort of role here too. And speaking of unused parts found in the game's textures, we also have this section of some houses that is found in the texture for Rogueport, which based on their size, this might have been meant to be used further on in the background. And then found in the textures for the shower room in the X-Naut Fortress, we can see this epic placeholder of Peach's dress. Now furthermore, most of the rest of this texture isn't normally seen either, but these were actually intended to be used on some slippers, towels, bath mats, and other toiletries. And interestingly enough, these can actually be found chilling in the void just outside the shower room, suggesting that they might have been pulled out closer to release, considering that they're basically ready to go. And while we're talking about Peach, there are also unused graphics for an 8-bit version of her. For those that don't know, there's a dressing room in the X-Naut Fortress where going into one of the booths here will cause Mario and all of the partners to transform into 8-bit versions of themselves. So the existence of Peach here suggests that the same thing might have once been planned for her as well. Then, after this, we have graphics for an unused green pair of boots that are thought to be an early version of the Super Boots as they were green in the first Paper Mario game. Then we got a pair of unused posters, and these both seem to be compressed versions of photos taken in real life. And although the text is way too small and compressed to make out, we can see what looks like a photo of a group of people outside of a building, and what looks like 5 people posing here. And then next, we have various placeholder graphics, including textures of Japanese characters that translate to interior, surface, dummy, as well as another one for surface. And then finally, there are some very early looking placeholder graphics of a blue star, a yellow star, as well as one of Mario, where we can see the early sketched design, which I covered in my previous video that obviously ended up getting updated for the final release of this game. And now last up for this video, there are actually several characters, enemies, and objects that are left over unused in Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. And a lot of them also have leftover sprites and animations too. Starting with the unused enemy side of things, first we have a family of red Buzzy Beetles, one regular one, a Parabuzzy, and then one with wings as well as a spike on top of its shell. And in the final game, only blue versions of these 3 are ever seen, and the only red one is the one with a spike on its back. And while we got the Buzzies on deck here, there's actually a behavior for them that was cut from the game too, and that's for them being on the ceiling during a battle, as well as an accompanying attack where they would drop back down onto the floor on top of the player. Next, we have unused upgraded versions of the Bob-omb, a Hyper Bob-omb that would rock a green color, as well as an Ultra Bob-omb that would be pink, similar to Bombette from the first Paper Mario. Now, both of these unused Bob-omb variants have similar descriptions and stats, though the Hyper Bob-omb would have 5 HP, while the Ultra one would have 7. Then next, there's this purple dark atomic boo, which although still has textures and animations left over, there aren't any descriptions or stats. And then I went over this early looking Paracupa in my previous video, but it turns out that there are also several animations for them as well. They unfortunately don't loop here like many of the other animations, but we got some animations of the early Paracupa flapping its wings, seemingly taking damage, and more. I think it's pretty cool to still be able to see animations for this Paracupa in the game with its early looking design. Now next up is a pretty weird unused enemy type, if you want to call it that, which has been found by Piston Miner in a reconstruction of a developer test map which has remnants left over in the PAL release of this game. And this enemy is referred to as Pennington, and it isn't the Pennington that we do see in the game, but rather it appears as a toad with a nibblefish on its head. Fortunately, it's super easy to defeat, and after you do so, another one will drop down and deliver a random message that looks messed up as it's presumably supposed to be using the Japanese font. As strange as this battle is, apparently this was used for testing by one of the game's battle programmers, Kazuhiro Tamura. And then last but not least for the unused enemies, we have this fella known as Okuru. Although only this sprite of the enemy remains in the game, Okuru apparently translates from Japanese to get angry. So based on there being a gauge on Okuru's head here, it's likely that their demeanor, power, as well as appearance might have changed when they'd get angrier, likely after getting attacked. Now, moving on to some non-enemy characters that were cut from the game, first we have Hanya here, who appears as both a rainbow-colored Spania enemy or a hamburger-themed Spinia, complete with a sesame seed bun and cheese teeth. Apparently, this Hanya was planned to be one of the partners that joins Luigi in the game, but for whatever reason, Hanya didn't end up making the cut. After this, we have an unused Cheep Cheep variant that's as green as the tie it wears. Although it's not 100% clear where this Cheep Cheep was intended to be used, based on the tie, it's been theorized that this may have been an early version of the Cheep Cheep that checks for your ticket to enter the blimp north of Rogueport. And then lastly, for the unused characters that still have leftover assets in the game, we have most of the partner characters from the Nintendo 64 game. Yeah, although Bo and Parakarry make appearances in the Thousand Year Door, the rest of the partner characters from Paper Mario 64 don't. And despite that, graphics, as well as various animations for each of them are still kicking around in the files, suggesting that they might have once been planned to make at least some sort of appearance in this game, especially considering that their design was updated from the Nintendo 64 versions, so these aren't just simply carryovers from that game. With the exception of Watt, who also has an animation of her sparking, the rest of the former partners only have idle and talking animations left over, so it's likely, at best, that they were only ever intended to have a minor appearance. Although these assets seem to have been eventually repurposed into the catch cards seen in Super Paper Mario, I think it's kinda too bad that these weren't ever used in the Thousand Year Door, especially considering that they were all left in here. Cause yeah, the more lackluster and sushi that we get, the better. Now to close this video off, there are also a few more unused objects left over in the game that I want to briefly go over. First, we got Paper Sample, and this appears to be exactly what it sounds like, a simple sample piece of paper that has a paper flipping animation. Then we have two objects listed as Kadono Test, with the first one appearing as warning text when loaded in, and then the second one as a plane featuring the early yellow and blue star sketches that I went over earlier, and this one also has an animation of the plane folding over. Paratest appears to duplicate the background texture that's loaded into a map, and it also has some animations of it rotating. TST P Peach loads in a portrait of Peach, and there's an animation of it rolling up. Test Item seems to very quickly cycle through a bunch of the early graphics that I mentioned in my previous video, ending on the early unused design of Admiral Bobbery. TST Vivi loads in a hella distorted texture of Vivian, and this is in fact the unused design of Vivian with the fireball on the hat that I went over in my previous video. There's also an equally unused animation for this object where it has this distorted Vivian like bouncing before flipping over. yeah, it's really weird. And then last up here are actually two test objects listed as Test Gone and Test Gone 2, and these are apparently for Hooktail, as in Japanese, the character is known as Gon Baba. Anyways, Test Gone 2 is this weird stack of textureless blocks, and this is apparently supposed to be a very early test of one of Hooktail's legs. Now, obviously, it's not the same size scale as Hooktail's legs are seen in the game, but this model also has some animations of the leg bending rather slowly. And as basic as this looks, I find it oddly satisfying, almost hypnotic. And then last up, we of course have the first Test Gone, and oddly enough, this brings in Vivian again. Yeah, but as you can see, this time in like two pieces with her fallen over on the bottom and a disjointed top of her hat floating above with associated animations having both sprites floating up and down. And no, I honestly have zero idea how this would be testing something for Hooktail, but if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. But yeah, this just looks incredibly odd to say the least. And with that, my friends, we'll fold things up for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door here on Lost Bits, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, check out some of my other Lost Bits videos, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for ripping by today, and I will see you in a bit.